My family cut me out of their lives for exposing my sister's infidelity to her fiancé and his family. But now, they come crawling back, asking for money because they need help. Yes, the same parents and sister who disowned me for revealing the scandal have now come begging for support. It's incredible, the audacity they have. I'm still trying to process how bold they were to plead for assistance from the very person they abandoned and rejected. I guess that's what happens when karma knocks on your door. Before diving into the main event, here's some brief context. My sister Jess, 37, is undeniably the golden child and the center of attention for our parents. Meanwhile, I always felt like the unwanted one, as if my needs didn't matter. My parents invested everything into Jess's success, leaving me to fend for myself. Jess is beautiful, but her personality is questionable. She's always used her looks to get her way, and it was frustrating to watch. As a child, it was tolerable, but during our teenage years, she became a nightmare. She constantly manipulated me, treated me with disdain, and humiliated me in front of family and friends. The worst part? Nobody ever held her accountable. She couldn't stand me getting even the slightest attention and always found a way to steal the spotlight and make me look bad. It was exhausting to be around her. After high school, she wasted 2 years trying to decide what to do. Eventually, Dad got her into a design school without her lifting a finger. Meanwhile, I was told to study hard, apply for scholarships, and cover my own expenses. For Jess, our parents acted like personal ATMs. They even took out loans to fund her education, only for her to drop out halfway through. Despite this, she still managed to land paid internships and decent jobs, but she couldn't keep them for long. Either she got fired for her irregularities or quit because she couldn't adapt to the workplace. Eventually, she convinced Dad to buy her a boutique because she didn't want to work for anyone else. With minimal experience, she dropped out of college, but Dad still secured her a loan to set up a decent shop. Meanwhile, I was stuck working in cafes and tutoring to make ends meet. They always had money for Jess, but were broke whenever I needed help. I even had to take out a student loan, which took me years to pay off. That double standard is what drove me away from my family. After high school, I moved out and rarely visited them. 7 years ago, during one of those rare visits, I went home for Christmas after 2.5 years because Mom insisted. By then, Jess had moved out and was running her boutique. She was engaged to a guy, a chemical engineer, who seemed like a decent person and was, frankly, much better than my sister deserved. He was attractive, financially stable, and clearly infatuated with her. I couldn't understand what he saw in Jess, but I kept my curiosity to myself. Jess also seemed to have changed. She was warm and kind to me, probably to impress her fiancé. Jess invited me to visit her boutique, and I said I'd stop by when I was free. The next day, while walking near her store, I decided to check it out. The sign said, "Closed," which seemed odd since it was 11 a.m. I pushed the door, and it was open. Thinking she might be taking a break, I walked in and called her, but her phone was off. Then, I saw something that made my stomach churn. She was making out with a guy in the corner of the shop. At first, I thought it was her fiancé, so I apologized and started to leave. But then Jess noticed me and pushed the guy away. That's when I saw his face. It wasn't her fiancé. Shocked, I left, but Jess ran after me, asking me to stop. We stood in awkward silence until she finally broke it. "You're not going to tell anyone, right?" I stared at her in disbelief. Her excuse was even more disgusting. "It didn't mean anything. He's just a cute customer who came to buy lingerie for his girlfriend." I was stunned. She kept apologizing, saying, "He was too handsome to ignore. I'm so sorry. Let's just forget this happened." I asked her, "Why are you apologizing to me? Does your fiancé know about your little session? I'm sure this isn't an isolated incident." She swore it was the first time she had cheated on her fiancé, but I doubted it. All her past relationships ended because of her infidelity. She tried to convince me, begging me to keep quiet and not tell anyone. So I left, furious. I felt terrible for her fiancé, partly because I had been cheated on a month earlier. I absolutely despise cheaters, especially those as despicable as my sister. Maybe I was projecting, but I felt a deep empathy for Jay's fiancé. When I got home, I couldn't hold it in. I told my mother what I had witnessed at the store. To my surprise, she brushed it off and told me to stay quiet. Her argument? Jay is getting married in a couple of months. You can't ruin this for her. Wait a minute, I'm not ruining anything. Your daughter ruined it by sneaking around in the store. Do you have any thoughts about that? I asked. She dismissed me, saying, "It's her life, her decision. We shouldn't interfere. Of course, it's her life. But she's cheating on her fiancé, and my mom was enabling her. She was more worried about losing a wealthy son-in-law and the lavish wedding she could flaunt to friends and family. They wanted me to cover for her, passing it off as a one-time mistake. But I knew it wasn't. I was furious, not just at the infidelity, but also at my parents' attitude. They didn't even try to talk sense into Jess. Jess texted me asking, "We're good, right?" I replied, "No, we're not. Until you tell your fiancé the truth." She rushed over to my parents' house to confront me. At first, she repeated that it was a one-time mistake and that I should let it go. When I refused, she became aggressive, yelling, "What's your problem? Why do you care? Why are you meddling?" I stood my ground and pushed her to confess to her fiancé. Things escalated into a shouting match between us. My parents sided with Jess, asking me to stay out of her business. The situation turned so toxic that I stormed out of the house. I wanted to leave immediately, but my flight wasn't until the next morning. So I wandered the neighborhood to cool down. When I returned in the afternoon, I found Jess sitting with her fiancé and his parents. I greeted everyone and was about to retreat to my room, but her fiancé invited me to join them. Jess and my parents looked uncomfortable. Jess tried to excuse me, saying I had a flight to catch and needed to pack. Her fiancé's parents were kind, asking about where I lived and what I did for work. Jess, desperate to steer the conversation, made a joke to ease her nerves. "Oh, don't worry. You're the first people who have ever cared about her life. She just has a normal job. Not everyone can run a business like I do, right, honey?" She kissed her fiancé. I was about to let it slide, but her words infuriated me. I snapped, "Yeah, that's true. Not everyone has the luck to own a boutique and sleep with their clients." I hadn't literally seen Jess with a client, but in my anger, the words spilled out. You can imagine the tension. The room fell silent. My mom broke it by laughing nervously. "You scared everyone with your dark humor," she said, trying to brush it off. Jess and my parents joined in awkward laughter, but the others looked confused. I turned to Jess's fiancé, smiled, and said, "Yes, my humor is dark and very truthful." Then I walked to my room. Jess's fiancé followed me into the hallway asking, "What do you mean?" Jess ran after him, insisting it was just a joke. Ignoring her, he pressed me for the truth. I froze, realizing I was about to open Pandora's box, but then I looked at their faces and said, "It wasn't a joke." Jess erupted, accusing me of being jealous because she was marrying a wonderful man while my ex had dumped me. Stunned by her venom, I lost control and told her fiancé everything I had seen. He was furious. Jess denied it, claiming I was making it up out of spite. The commotion drew everyone to the room. My mom joined Jess in attacking me. "Please ignore her," she told Jess's fiancé. "She's been through a hard time and now sees cheaters everywhere. You know Jess would never do such a thing, right?" I was shocked. My own mother was making me out to be delusional. Thankfully, her fiancé wasn't naive. He demanded Jess's phone. She clung to it, but he snatched it and forced her to unlock it. The evidence was all there. Flirty texts, sexting, even nudes. He threw the engagement ring at her and stormed out with his parents. Smart move, considering the ring looked expensive. Jess fell to her knees, begging him not to call off the wedding, chasing after him and his parents outside. The fallout was brutal. My mom slapped me across the face before I could even speak. "Get out! You're dead to us! Don't you dare show your face here again. You are no longer our daughter." I looked at my dad for support, but he shook his head in disgust and walked away silently. I didn't cry. I stared straight at my mom and said, "I'll never come back to this hell." I packed my things and left. Jess tried to stop me, screaming that I'd ruined her life. I pushed past her and left. That night I stayed at the airport. I blocked all their numbers and deleted their contacts. Since then, I haven't spoken to any of them. Yesterday, Jess and my mom showed up unexpectedly, but to keep this short, I'll summarize what they were in a difficult situation. Jess's life had completely fallen apart. Her boutique had gone bankrupt and she was struggling to make ends meet. My parents were also in ruin, drowning in debt because my dad had been battling a terrible illness and was unable to do much. They came crawling back, asking for my help. I shut the door in their faces and didn't let them in. I feel satisfied with my decision, but part of me still worries about my dad. Do you think I should help him given that he's been hit hard by illness? Update 1. Thank you all for your advice. Here's a detailed update. I was feeling uneasy after receiving mixed responses to my previous post, so I reached out to my aunt, my dad's sister, who lives a block away from my parents. I've maintained moderate contact with her since moving out. My aunt usually keeps me informed about the drama at home. A while ago, she mentioned that my dad felt guilty about mistreating me and wanted to make amends, but my mom, still blindly loyal to Jess, discouraged him. My dad, being a peacemaker, likely didn't want to disrupt the household by reaching out to me. She also told me that after Jess's infidelity came to light, my dad stopped paying the boutique's mortgage. By then, he had already covered more than half of it. He asked Jess to pay the remaining amount, but she failed, and the property went into foreclosure. Obviously, she couldn't reclaim it. Karma truly works in mysterious ways. After her breakup, Jess quickly latched onto another sponsor to sustain her luxurious lifestyle. But surprise, surprise, her lies caught up with her, and he left her as well. Meanwhile, my mom continued to support Jess, refusing to hold her accountable for her mistakes. She had benefited from what Jess received from her boyfriends and my dad's money for years. Now, with my dad sick and unable to work, they don't even care about him. It feels like karma has come full circle. My dad never supported me or stood by my side, so I told myself I wouldn't feel bad for him now. He made his bed, and now he has to lie in it. A month later, I found out that my mom had left my dad in a rundown hospital. They had defaulted on their insurance for over a year, so the coverage had drastically reduced. Now they had to cover a significant portion of the surgery costs themselves. My mom either couldn't or didn't want to pay for it. I felt awful. I couldn't bring myself to let him suffer and possibly die while I had the means to help. So I went to see him. When he saw me, he broke down in tears, hugged me, and apologized repeatedly. He told me that my mom hadn't visited him once since dropping him off at the hospital. I took him out of that place, admitted him to a decent healthcare facility, and covered his treatment expenses. Somehow my mom and Jess found out and showed up at the hospital. But to my surprise, my dad stood his ground. He threw my mom out and told her that once he recovered, he would deal with her. Jess kept her distance, but my mom tried to talk to me, thanking me for stepping up. I ignored her completely, pretending she didn't exist. 3 weeks ago, my dad was discharged and is now on the mend. I check in on him occasionally, but I keep my distance emotionally. I told him that I felt obligated to help because he raised me, but he shouldn't expect anything more from me. I made it clear that I didn't want ongoing contact. To his credit, he respects my boundaries and has expressed a desire to work on our relationship, but at my pace. I'm still figuring out how I feel about that. That's all for now. I'll update if anything significant happens. Update 2. As my dad promised, the first thing he did after recovering was leave my mom. He secretly sold the house, which was under his name, packed his belongings into an RV, and left without a word. At the time, my mom was visiting Jess in another city, so she had no idea. When she returned and found him gone, she panicked and went to file a missing person report. However, after investigating, the authorities concluded that my dad had left voluntarily, so no report was filed. Left with no place to stay, my mom turned to Jess for help, but Jess was living in her boyfriend's house and couldn't take her in. Naturally, my mom came looking for me. The moment I opened the door, she started crying and apologizing. I let her in, mostly because I live in an apartment and didn't want her creating a scene for the neighbors. She recounted everything I just mentioned and then some. I asked her, "So what? Why me? What happened to your golden child? Why isn't she supporting you?" She started sobbing, saying Jess was struggling financially. Her boutique had closed due to supply shortages, she had no money for inventory, couldn't pay the mortgage, and everything fell apart. Jess was barely getting by herself and couldn't take care of my mom. "So that's why you came to my door," I said. "The daughter you never supported and always resented. Why isn't your favorite child helping you?" She quickly defended herself. "Dear, it was your father who chose to support Jess financially. Her boutique, her education, everything. Yet you still paid for his treatment. I've always treated you both equally. Why such bitter words for me? If it's about that slap, I'm truly sorry. You have no idea how humiliated we were after Jess's wedding was called off. I never supported Jess's infidelity. I just wanted you to stay silent until the wedding. But that's all in the past. Please, forgive your mother." I told her there was no need to justify anything to me. I explained that I paid for my dad's treatment because it was my decision, just like it was my decision not to help her. I made it clear that I wasn't comfortable talking to her and that she should leave and not come back. She left, apologizing the whole time. Later, I heard that my mom had found a job at a salon. Well, good for her. She's finally realizing the importance of standing on her own feet. A few days ago, I learned that Jess had been kicked out by her boyfriend after being caught cheating again. Once a cheater, always a cheater. She turned to my mom for help, but this time, my mom threw her out. My mom is currently living in a friend's garage, which has been converted into a makeshift room. So Jess had no help to count on. Apparently, my mom lashed out at Jess, blaming her for everything. My dad leaving, me hating them, and their current misery. Jess then called me from a new number crying and begging me to intervene. I hung up before she could finish her sentence and immediately blocked the number. After that, she sent me a long, emotional email. She blamed my mom for enabling her toxic behavior, saying, "I wasn't born this way. Our parents made me this way. Why didn't they teach me morals and values? They gave me everything on a silver platter, and now they've abandoned me to fend for myself. How unfair is that? They could have taught me self-reliance like they taught you. If you think I've had it easy because of their favoritism, you're wrong. Look at my life now compared to yours. I still rely on others, jumping from one person to another, while you've built something for yourself. Please, help me put my life back together. I'm begging you." Her email was moving, wasn't it? So, what do you think I did? That's right, I deleted it and blocked her. I know how manipulative she is. How else do you think she convinces rich men to give her money? Sure, her looks help, but she's also good with words, and maybe other things too. I don't care. Not about her, my mom, or even my dad. I paid for his surgery because I felt I owed him for bringing me into this world. That's it. I've endured immense mental torment because of them, and it took me years to heal. There's no way I'm letting them disrupt my peace again. Update 3. A dose of karma in full force. A few days ago, I got another call from an unknown number. At first, I wasn't going to answer, but something told me I should. Note to self, stop trusting my instincts. On the other end, I heard my mom's broken voice. Without even saying hello, She started crying and recounting how she and Jess had ended up living in her friend's garage. Apparently, things had gotten even worse. Now the two of them are sleeping together on the cold, damp garage floor with just a mattress for comfort. Mom began complaining about their living conditions, saying the garage is freezing and uncomfortable. They're sharing a small space crammed with rusty tools and dusty boxes. We have no privacy and we can't even take a decent shower. We're living like beggars, she sobbed. My response? And this is my problem because... Before she could say anything else, I hung up and blocked the number. Yes, I heard her sobbing throughout the call. And yes, I found it amusing. Call me petty. I don't care. After everything they put me through, I feel like I earned this moment. I have no regrets. They chose their path, and now they're paying the price. Let them enjoy their life in the garage because they don't have any other options. As for me, I'm finally at peace knowing I did the right thing by cutting them out of my life. End of story for now. If karma keeps working its magic, I'll be sure to keep you updated. Update 4. A hidden truth revealed. First of all, thank you to everyone who has commented and shared your own stories of favoritism. Reading your experiences made me realize something important. When one child is treated differently, there's often a deeper hidden reason behind it. A pattern that sadly repeats itself in many families. What struck me the most was how several of you mentioned that favoritism in your cases was the result of infidelity in the past. This made me reflect on my own situation and start questioning the real reason behind the resentment my parents always seemed to have toward me. Recently, while my dad was visiting the area, I decided to confront him. Even though we had barely spoken since I helped with his treatment, I felt like I needed answers, even if they turned out to be painful. I contacted him and asked to meet. The conversation started awkwardly. After all, we hadn't had a close relationship in years. But I didn't want to keep carrying this uncertainty. Finally, after some small talk, I asked the question that had been eating away at me. Why did you always treat me with so much resentment? Why did I always feel like a stranger in my own family? He went silent for what felt like an eternity. I could see the internal struggle on his face, and at that moment, I knew there was something bigger behind all of this. After what seemed like forever, he let out a deep sigh and confessed, "You're the product of an affair." Those words hit me like a bombshell. Everything inside me froze. I tried to process what I had just heard, but it felt like the world had stopped spinning. He continued, his voice shaking, explaining that my mom had an affair during a rough period in their marriage. When I was born, he always suspected I wasn't his biological child. Over time, he confirmed it. The resentment grew, and it deeply affected how he treated me. He also said he believed my mom resented me for the same reason, even though she never admitted it outright. I didn't know what to do with this information. My dad apologized for all the pain he had caused me, for all the resentment and distance, and for how cruel and unfair he had been. With tears in his eyes, he begged for my forgiveness, admitting he had been a terrible father. But I don't know if I can forgive him. Even with his confession and his apologies, the damage is done. Those scars run deep. I don't know what to do with all of this. My world has been turned upside down, and I'm struggling to put the pieces back together. The only thing I know for sure is that I don't want to see my mom or my half-sister ever again. They've caused too much pain in my life, and I have no interest in reopening those wounds. This will likely be my last update. I have so much to think about, and I'm not in the right headspace to keep sharing my story. What started as something I could laugh about has turned into a nightmare. Thank you for listening.